The scent of pine needles and snow hung in the crisp December air, sharp and clean against the backdrop of musky perfumes and cologne that filled the great hall. Wooden beams stretched overhead, adorned with evergreen garlands and twinkling lights for the winter solstice ceremony. A sacred time when wolves from all packs gathered to celebrate the longest night. A time of unity, a time of pairing, a time I had come to dread. I pressed my back against the rough stone wall, trying to make myself smaller, an impossible feat given my size. My cream-colored sweater, chosen carefully to complement my pale blonde hair, strained across my full figure. I'd spent hours getting ready, pinning my hair into soft waves that cascaded down my shoulders, applying makeup with trembling fingers, hoping that maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year, someone would look at me and see beyond the layers of flesh that marked me as undesirable. Omegas were rare, treasured for their calming presence, their ability to soothe even the most volatile alpha. We were supposed to be revered, protected, cherished. Unless you were me, Eleanor Green, the fat Omega no one wanted. My fingers instinctively reached for the silver pendant at my throat, a crescent moon my grandmother had given me before she died. "Your value isn't in your body, little moon," she'd whispered. "It's in your heart. One day, someone will see it beating strong and true." I closed my eyes, drawing strength from her memory, from the cool metal against my skin. When I opened them again, I caught Rachel Fletcher staring at me from across the room, her lip curled in disgust. She leaned toward her friend and whispered something that made them both burst into laughter. I didn't need wolf hearing to know they were talking about me. "Look at her," Rachel's voice carried, intentionally loud enough for me to hear. "The winter ceremony is for mating, not eating. Did she mistake it for a buffet?" My cheeks burned with humiliation as more heads turned in my direction. I kept my eyes down, watching the condensation form on my untouched glass of champagne, wishing the floor would open up and swallow me whole. "I heard no alpha would even consider her as a mate," someone else added. "What's the point of an Omega too big to protect? She'd just slow the pack down." The weight of their words pressed against my chest, constricting my lungs until each breath felt like a battle. This was nothing new. I'd endured their cruelty since puberty, when other girls grew tall and willowy, while my body expanded in all directions. But tonight, it cut deeper. I was 25 now. The years of hoping for acceptance were beginning to feel like a cruel joke I'd played on myself. Movement at the entrance of the great hall caused a ripple of silence to spread through the crowd. I looked up, curious despite my misery. King Dominic Ravencroft had arrived. Even from across the room, his presence was overwhelming. Tall and powerfully built, he moved with the casual confidence of a predator who had never known fear. His dark hair was cropped short on the sides but longer on top, and his jawline could have been carved from granite. He wore a simple black suit that did nothing to hide the strength beneath, the alpha power that seemed to radiate from him in tangible waves. The crowd parted before him like water breaking against stone. He nodded occasionally to acknowledge greetings, but his steel-gray eyes remained distant, assessing. This was his first winter ceremony as king after his father's death 6 months ago. Rumors swirled about whether he would finally choose a mate tonight, and every unmated female in the room, except me, seemed to vibrate with hope and possibility. I allowed myself a moment of foolish fantasy. What would it be like to be claimed by someone like him? To be cherished? Protected? Desired? To have those intense eyes look at me with heat, instead of the indifference or disgust I'd grown accustomed to. As if he could hear my thoughts, King Dominic's gaze suddenly locked with mine across the crowded room. I froze, unable to breathe. Time seemed to suspend as those gray eyes narrowed slightly, his head tilting almost imperceptibly, as if I were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Something fierce and unreadable flashed across his features before he turned away, continuing his progress through the adoring crowd. I released the breath I'd been holding, my heart hammering against my ribs. It meant nothing. A coincidence. Kings didn't notice girls like me. "Oh my God, did you see that?" Rachel's voice cut through my thoughts. She actually thought he was looking at her, as if the king would ever want a fat Omega when he could have anyone. Fresh laughter erupted around me, and I felt something inside me crack. A lifetime of mockery, of silent tears into my pillow, of trying to make myself worthy of love despite my size. It all crystallized into something sharp and painful. I set down my champagne glass with shaking fingers and pushed away from the wall. I needed air. I needed escape. I needed to be anywhere but here, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing but a joke. I slipped through a side door that led to a stone terrace overlooking the snow-covered gardens. The bitter cold hit me like a physical blow, but I welcomed it, gulping down lungfuls of crisp air as tears threatened to spill over. The moon hung full and bright overhead, casting silver light across the landscape. I leaned against the stone balustrade, letting the tears fall freely now, watching them disappear into the darkness below. "You'll freeze out here." The deep voice behind me sent a jolt of shock down my spine. I whirled around, hastily wiping at my cheeks, mortified to be caught crying. King Dominic stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the light from inside. He held a thick fur cloak in one hand. I blinked at him in confusion, certain I must be hallucinating. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't mean to. I'll go back inside." "No." The single word held the unmistakable command of an alpha. He stepped forward, closing the distance between us, and settled the cloak around my shoulders. It was heavy and warm, smelling faintly of cedar and something distinctly male. "You were leaving because of them." It wasn't a question. I lowered my gaze, unable to meet those penetrating eyes. "It's nothing I'm not used to." His jaw tightened. "That doesn't make it acceptable." I didn't know what to say. Why was the king of all werewolves standing on a freezing terrace talking to me, comforting me? I clutched the edges of the cloak tighter, suddenly aware of how ridiculous I must look to him. Puffy eyes, red nose, my too large body draped in his royal fur. "Tell me your name." Again, not a question. "Eleanor Green, Your Majesty, from the Clearwater Pack. Eleanor." He said my name slowly, as if tasting it. "Why do you allow them to speak to you that way?" The question caught me off guard. What can I do? They're not wrong about me. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Explain." I gestured helplessly at myself. "Look at me. I'm not what an Omega should be. I'm not... Not what?" His voice had dropped lower, a growl underlying the words. "Desirable," I whispered, the admission burning my throat. "No alpha wants an Omega who looks like me." To my surprise, a corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement. "Is that what you think?" Before I could respond, the terrace door opened again, and a tall man with the bearing of a high-ranking beta stepped out. "Your Majesty, the council is waiting to begin the ceremony." Dominic didn't turn around. "Tell them I'll be there shortly, Gabriel." The beta's eyes flickered to me, widening slightly in surprise, before his face returned to careful neutrality. He nodded and disappeared back inside. "I should go," I said quickly. "I'm keeping you from your duties, Eleanor." My name in his mouth sounded different somehow, weighted with meaning I couldn't decipher. "You're wrong about what alphas want." I blinked up at him, confused. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I have a proposition for you." "A proposition?" I repeated, feeling suddenly lightheaded. "Yes." His eyes never left mine. "I need a mate. One who won't challenge me for power. One who can bring calm to a fractured kingdom. One who sees beyond the crown to the man." He paused. "One like you." My mouth fell open in shock. "Me? But why would you—" "The winter solstice ceremony begins in 10 minutes, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "I will announce my chosen mate then." He reached out, one finger gently tilting my chin up. "Unless you tell me now that you refuse." I stared at him, searching for the joke, the cruelty behind the offer, but his eyes held nothing but intensity and something else. A vulnerability so brief I might have imagined it. "Why me?" I managed to whisper. The corner of his mouth lifted again. "Because when everyone else in that room was staring at me with hunger and ambition, you looked at me with understanding. Because I need an Omega strong enough to stand beside a king." His thumb brushed lightly across my cheek. "Because you're the only one who doesn't want me for my crown." The door opened again, and Gabriel cleared his throat pointedly. Dominic stepped back. 10 minutes, Eleanor. The choice is yours." He turned and strode back inside, leaving me alone on the terrace with his cloak around my shoulders and his impossible offer echoing in my ears. The stars above seemed to spin as I struggled to breathe. The Alpha King wanted me as his mate. Me, the fat Omega no one wanted. It had to be a mistake, or worse, a cruel joke. And yet, the look in his eyes had seemed sincere. Could I trust it? Could I trust him? I had 10 minutes to decide. I clutched the fur cloak tighter around my shoulders, my mind racing as fast as my heart. The warmth of the garment enveloped me like an embrace, carrying his scent, powerful, intoxicating, utterly alpha. What game was he playing? Kings didn't choose mates like me. They chose beautiful, politically advantageous wolves, strategic alliances, perfect breeding partners, not overweight Omegas from minor packs who spent winter ceremonies hiding in corners. And yet, something in his eyes had seemed genuine. That brief flash of vulnerability beneath the steel, the way he'd noticed me when no one else ever did, the way he'd followed me out here when he should have been greeting nobility and entertaining potential mates. The pendant at my throat seemed to grow warmer against my skin, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. Your value isn't in your body, little moon. It's in your heart. Could he truly see my heart? Or was this some elaborate humiliation, orchestrated by Rachel and her friends? I turned to face the snow-covered gardens again, breathing deeply to calm my racing thoughts. Below, moonlight silvered the frozen fountain at the center of the maze, turning ice to diamonds. I'd been 8 years old when my parents first brought me to a royal gathering, and I'd gotten lost in that very maze. I remembered crying, certain I'd be trapped forever among the towering hedges until a boy found me, a boy with serious gray eyes who'd taken my hand and led me out without a word. I'd forgotten that until now. The memory stirred something inside me, a flicker of courage. I straightened my spine and lifted my chin. Whether his offer was sincere or a cruel joke, I refused to cower any longer. I would face whatever came next with dignity. I was still an Omega, regardless of my size, and Omegas had their own kind of strength, a quiet, enduring power that had nothing to do with physical form. Turning away from the railing, I made my way back to the door. Through the glass, I could see the great hall had been transformed. Hundreds of candles now illuminated the space, and wolves had arranged themselves in a ceremonial circle. At the center stood King Dominic, regal and imposing, his face an unreadable mask as he spoke with members of his council. As I watched, Rachel approached him, her willowy form draped in a shimmering silver gown that emphasized her perfect figure. She smiled up at him, tossing her dark hair over one shoulder, placing a delicate hand on his arm. My stomach twisted painfully. Of course, this was why he'd made his offer, to distract me while he chose someone else worthy. I should leave now, spare myself the humiliation of watching him select someone else. I could slip away unnoticed, return to my tiny apartment in the city, and continue my solitary existence. Safe, predictable, lonely, or I could step through that door and face whatever waited on the other side. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant again, drawing strength from its familiar shape. The winter solstice was a night of magic and transformation, she used to tell me. A night when old patterns could be broken and new beginnings forged in the longest darkness. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped back into the warmth of the great hall. All eyes turned to me immediately. I saw shock, confusion, and undisguised disdain as wolves took in my tear-stained face and the royal cloak around my shoulders. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Rachel's expression darkened from flirtatious to furious as she registered my return, but I wasn't looking at her. My gaze found Dominic's across the room, and the intensity I saw there made my breath catch. Without breaking eye contact, he stepped away from Rachel and the council members, silencing the room with a raised hand. The winter solstice ceremony will now begin, he announced, his deep voice echoing off the stone walls. As is tradition, we gather to celebrate the longest night and the promise of returning light. And as your king, it is my privilege to announce my chosen mate. A hush fell over the assembly. I stood frozen just inside the door, unable to move forward or retreat as Dominic's gaze swept the room once before returning to me. "Come forward, Eleanor Green of the Clearwater Pack," he commanded, his voice ringing with authority. A collective gasp rippled through the great hall. Dozens of pairs of eyes swiveled between Dominic and me, disbelief etched on every face. For a moment, I couldn't move, my feet seemingly frozen to the polished floor. This couldn't be happening. Not to me. "Eleanor." Dominic's voice softened slightly, but the command remained. "Come." Something in that voice, a thread of reassurance beneath the steel, gave me the courage to put one foot in front of the other. The crowd parted reluctantly, wolves stepping aside as I made my slow progress toward the center of the circle. I felt their stares like physical touches, some curious, others hostile. Rachel's face had contorted into an expression of pure rage, her perfect features twisted into something ugly. "This is a joke," she hissed as I passed her. "It has to be." I kept my eyes forward, fixed on Dominic. His expression revealed nothing, but his gaze never wavered from mine. One step, then another. The walk seemed endless, each footfall echoing loudly in the hushed room. I was acutely aware of my body, of the way the royal cloak draped over my curves, of how different I looked from every other female in attendance. When I finally reached him, Dominic extended his hand. After a heartbeat of hesitation, I placed my trembling fingers in his palm. His hand was warm and calloused. A warrior's hand, not a pampered royal's. He closed his fingers around mine with surprising gentleness. "Wolves of the 5 territories," he addressed the crowd, his voice carrying to every corner of the great hall. "Tonight, under the full moon of the winter solstice, I present to you my chosen mate, Eleanor Green, Omega of the Clearwater Pack." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the collective shock, the disbelief, the outrage. And then, "You can't be serious!" The voice that finally broke the silence belonged to a tall, silver-haired man wearing the ceremonial robes of the High Council. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, this is not what we discussed. The kingdom needs a strategic alliance through mating, not this." Dominic's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around mine. "Counselor Harris, I was not aware that my choice of mate required your approval." "Of course not, sire, but what?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Dominic's voice hardened. "Speak plainly, counselor." The older man's eyes flicked to me dismissively before returning to Dominic. "She is hardly suitable. No political connections, no distinguished lineage, and frankly," his lip curled slightly, "not the physical specimen one would expect for the royal bloodline." I flinched, the words cutting deep despite their familiarity. I'd heard variations of them my entire life, but having them spoken so publicly, so officially, made them pierce like daggers. I tried to withdraw my hand from Dominic's, but his grip tightened, keeping me anchored at his side. "You find fault with her appearance?" Dominic asked, his tone dangerously casual. Harris sniffed. "Among other things, yes. The royal mate should exemplify the strength and beauty of our kind. She should calm the beast within me," Dominic interrupted, his voice dropping to a near growl. "She should balance my strength with compassion. She should see the man beneath the crown." His gaze swept the room, challenging anyone to contradict him. "Eleanor Green does all these things." My heart pounded so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. He couldn't possibly mean these words. This had to be some political maneuver I didn't understand, some game being played with me as an unwitting pawn. "Your Majesty?" A female voice called out. Rachel stepped forward, her silver gown shimmering in the candlelight. "If you desire an Omega, there are others more suitable. I myself carry the Omega gene from my mother's line, though I present as Beta. I could serve you far better than she ever could." Dominic's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You were cruel to her tonight. I witnessed it." Rachel faltered, her confident smile slipping. It was just harmless teasing, Your Majesty. Girls being girls." "It was cruelty," he corrected coldly. "And cruelty has no place in the heart of one who would be queen." Rachel's face flushed with humiliation. She opened her mouth to speak again, but Gabriel, the Beta who had summoned Dominic earlier, stepped forward. Your Majesty, perhaps it would be wise to continue this discussion privately with a council before making such a momentous announcement. Dominic turned to me then, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. What say you, Eleanor? Should I reconsider my choice? All eyes were on me, waiting for my response. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their certainty that I should, refuse this impossible honor, that I would acknowledge my unworthiness and slink back to the shadows where I belonged. But something had changed inside me the moment Dominic had called my name. A lifetime of shrinking myself, of accepting the narrative others had written for me, had suddenly become unbearable. Whether this was real or some elaborate charade, I was tired of being the punchline to everyone else's jokes. I squared my shoulders and lifted my chin. I am Omega, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I may not look like what everyone thinks an Omega should be, but my worth isn't in my appearance. It's in my heart. My grandmother's pendant seemed to pulse against my skin as I echoed her words. If His Majesty sees value in me, then who are any of you to question his judgment? A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Dominic's eyes widened slightly, a flash of approval, and something warmer, crossing his features, before his expression settled back into regal impassivity. Well said. He turned back to the assemblage. The decision is made. Eleanor Green will be my mate and your queen. The bonding ceremony will take place at midnight. Counselor Harris stepped forward again, his face flushed with anger. Your father would never have— My father is dead, Dominic cut him off, his voice like ice. And I am king. Question me again in public, Harris, and you will find yourself relieved of your position. He looked around the room, his gaze stopping briefly on each council member. Does anyone else wish to challenge my decision? The silence that followed was answer enough. Good. Dominic nodded to Gabriel. Prepare the moon chamber for the ceremony, and see that suitable attire is provided for my future queen. Gabriel bowed deeply. Yes, Your Majesty. He turned to me with a slight smile. If you'll come with me, my lady, my lady. The title sounded foreign, impossible when directed at me. I glanced uncertainly at Dominic. Go, he said softly. I'll join you shortly. There are matters I must attend to first. I nodded, reluctantly releasing his hand. Without his touch anchoring me, I felt suddenly adrift, exposed to the hostile stares of the crowd. Gabriel seemed to sense my discomfort, and positioned himself protectively at my side, leading me toward a doorway at the far end of the great hall. As we left, I could feel Rachel's hateful glare boring into my back. And she wasn't alone. Dozens of eyes followed my exit, filled with resentment, disbelief, and in some cases, calculation. I might have been elevated by the king's declaration, but I'd also been made a target. The corridors of the palace were quieter, the sounds of the gathering fading as Gabriel led me deeper into the ancient stone structure. Tapestries depicting wolf hunts and battles lined the walls, illuminated by wrought iron sconces. Our footsteps echoed on the polished floor, the only sound in the hushed stillness. They'll adjust, Gabriel said suddenly, breaking the silence. I glanced at him in surprise. What? The nobles, the council, they'll adjust to the idea of you as queen. It may take time, but they will. I swallowed hard. Why would the king choose me? The truth, please. Gabriel's pace slowed as he considered his answer. His Majesty has been different since his father died, more solitary, more watchful. The council has been pressuring him to take a mate for months, preferably the daughter of one of the southern pack leaders to strengthen our borders. Then why me? I pressed. I'm nobody. My pack isn't politically important. I bring no alliances, no advantages. Perhaps that's precisely why. Gabriel stopped before an ornate door carved with phases of the moon. The king needs someone who wants him, not his crown or his power. Someone who can see Dominic, not just the Alpha King. He studied me with keen eyes. Is that someone you, Eleanor Green? The question caught me off guard. Was it? I barely knew Dominic Ravencroft. I'd spent less than 15 minutes in his presence, and yet there had been something in those gray eyes, a loneliness that matched my own, a weariness beneath the strength. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I'd like the chance to find out. Gabriel nodded, seemingly satisfied with my response. "Then let's prepare you for your bonding ceremony." He pushed open the door, revealing a spacious chamber dominated by a four-poster bed draped in midnight blue silk. Several female betas waited inside, surrounded by gowns, jewelry, and various beauty implements. "The king's chosen," Gabriel announced. The women curtsied, though I caught flickers of surprise on their faces as they took in my appearance. "She is to be prepared for the bonding ceremony. His Majesty's orders." The oldest of the women, a dignified beta with silver-streaked dark hair, stepped forward. "We are honored to serve you, my lady. I am Helena, head of the royal household." "I'll leave you in Helena's capable hands," Gabriel said. "I must return to His Majesty." As he turned to go, I caught his arm. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for your kindness." He smiled, a genuine warmth lighting his features. "Every king needs a queen who brings out the best in him. Perhaps you are exactly what Dominic needs, what we all need." With a slight bow, he departed, closing the door behind him. Helena approached with a gentle smile. "Come, my lady. We have much to do and little time. The bonding ceremony must begin precisely at midnight." As the women bustled around me, drawing a bath scented with rose petals and preparing various lotions and perfumes, I caught my reflection in a full-length mirror across the room. The woman who stared back at me seemed both familiar and strange, still round-faced, still full-figured, but somehow different. There was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a straightness to her spine, a lift to her chin. For the first time in my life, I looked at my reflection and didn't immediately wish to be someone else. "Do you truly believe I can be queen?" I asked Helena softly as she helped me remove Dominic's cloak. Her eyes met mine in the mirror. "I believe that our king sees something in you that he needs, and I believe that sometimes the strongest hearts come in unexpected packages." She squeezed my shoulder gently. "The rest, my lady, will be up to you to prove." The moon chamber took my breath away. Ancient stone walls curved upward to form a perfect dome. The ceiling opened to the night sky through a circular aperture. Moonlight poured through this opening, creating a natural spotlight in the center of the room where a raised dais stood. Around the chamber, hundreds of candles flickered in wall sconces, their golden light complementing the silver moonbeams. The air smelled of cedar, sage, and something older, a primal scent that stirred something deep within me. I stood at the threshold, my heart pounding so hard I felt lightheaded. Helena had dressed me in a gown of silver blue silk that flowed over my curves like water, neither hiding nor emphasizing my size, but somehow making it seem regal rather than shameful. My pale blonde hair had been partially braided with tiny moonstone beads, the rest falling in soft waves down my back. Around my neck, my grandmother's crescent moon pendant rested against my skin, now joined by a delicate silver chain Dominic had sent. "A gift from the king to his chosen," Gabriel had said when delivering it. I felt beautiful for the first time in my life. Different, yes, still not the willowy ideal of werewolf beauty, but beautiful nonetheless. "It's time, my lady," Helena whispered beside me. "They're waiting." They. Not just Dominic, but the entire assembly I'd left behind in the Great Hall. Nobles, council members, pack leaders, all gathered to witness the bonding ceremony between their king and the fat Omega no one had wanted until tonight. "What if I can't do this?" I whispered back, sudden panic clawing at my throat. "What if I'm not what he needs? What if—" "Breathe, child." Helena's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. If she's brought you to this moment, this place, there's a reason." Her eyes, warm and wise, held mine. "Trust yourself. Trust him." Could I? Trust this man I barely knew, who had turned my world upside down with a single declaration? Trust myself, when I'd spent a lifetime believing I wasn't enough? Before I could answer, the low, resonant sound of a horn echoed through the chamber. The ceremony was beginning. Helena gave my hand one final squeeze before stepping away, leaving me alone at the entrance. The assembled wolves turned as one to face me. Hundreds of eyes, some curious, some hostile, some simply stunned. At the far end of the chamber, standing upon the dais in the moonlight, waited Dominic. He'd changed into ceremonial attire, black pants and boots, his chest bare except for a silver chain bearing the royal insignia. The moonlight silvered his skin, highlighting the defined muscles of his torso and the numerous scars that told the story of battles fought and won. His dark hair gleamed, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made the rest of the room fade away. Somehow, my feet began to move. I walked slowly down the aisle that had formed in the crowd, focusing only on Dominic, using his unwavering gaze as an anchor against the tide of whispers that followed my progress. "The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes," I repeated silently with each step. "Trust yourself. Trust him." When I reached the dais, Dominic extended his hand. I placed mine in his, and the warmth of his touch sent a shiver up my arm. "You came," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Did you doubt I would?" I asked, surprised at the steadiness in my own voice. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I've learned to doubt everything, Eleanor. It comes with the crown." Before I could respond, a tall, austere woman in ceremonial robes stepped onto the dais. The high priestess of the moon goddess, I realized, recognizing her from previous ceremonies I'd attended. She raised her arms, and silence fell over the assembly. "Children of the moon," she intoned, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. "We gather in her light to witness the sacred bonding of Alpha and Omega, of strength and compassion, of power and peace." She lowered her arms, her sharp eyes moving between Dominic and me. "Who comes before the goddess to seek her blessing?" "I, Dominic Alexander Ravencroft, Alpha King of the 5 territories, son of Richard and Elaine, descendant of the first pack." Dominic's voice rang clear and strong. The high priestess turned to me expectantly. For a horrifying moment, my mind went blank. I'd never expected to participate in a bonding ceremony, let alone a royal one. I had no idea what to say. Dominic's hand tightened around mine, a subtle reassurance. I took a deep breath. "I, Eleanor Marie Green, Omega of the Clearwater Pack, daughter of William and Sarah, descendant of the Western Wolves," I said, thankful that my voice didn't tremble. The high priestess nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Alpha and Omega, as it was in the beginning, so shall it be now. The goddess created the wolf kind with balance in mind, the fierce and the gentle, the storm and the calm, the strength and the heart. She produced a silver dagger from within her robes. Tonight, under her watchful eye, you will become one in blood, one in spirit, one in purpose." She took Dominic's free hand, turning his palm upward. With a swift, practiced motion, she drew the blade across his skin, opening a thin line of crimson. She did the same to my palm, the sharp pain making me gasp softly. "Blood of the Alpha," she said, pressing our bleeding palms together. "Blood of the Omega. Let them mingle as your lives now mingle, inseparable until death." The moment our blood touched, something extraordinary happened. A warmth unlike anything I'd ever experienced spread from my palm up my arm, flooding my chest and radiating outward until my entire body tingled with it. From Dominic's sudden intake of breath, I knew he felt it too. This strange, wonderful connection forming between us. "The bond begins," the high priestess murmured, a note of surprise in her voice. She wrapped a silver cord around our joined hands. "As this cord binds your flesh, so shall your souls be bound. Speak the vows, Alpha King." Dominic's eyes, now glowing faintly with alpha power, locked with mine. "I, Dominic, take you, Eleanor, as my mate, my queen, my equal in all things. I offer you my protection, my loyalty, my strength. I promise to honor your wisdom, cherish your compassion, and respect your power. By the light of the moon goddess, I bind myself to you, this night, and all nights to come." Traditional vows, yet something in the way he spoke them, with such intensity, such focus, made them feel personal, intimate. As if he were making these promises to me, Eleanor, not just to the Omega who would be his queen. "Speak the vows, Omega," the high priestess directed. I swallowed hard. "I, Eleanor, take you, Dominic, as my mate, my king, my partner in all things. I offer you my understanding, my loyalty, my calm." I promise to temper your strength with gentleness, balance your power with peace, and stand beside you in darkness and in light. By the grace of the moon goddess, I bind myself to you this night and all nights to come." The cord around our hands began to glow with a soft silver light. The high priestess nodded in approval. "The goddess hears your vows and finds them worthy. Now comes the final step, the marking that completes the bond." She stepped back, leaving us alone in the circle of moonlight. "Alpha, claim your mate," a murmur rippled through the crowd. This was the most intimate part of the ceremony, usually performed in private, but royal bondings were different. The claiming had to be witnessed, the bond confirmed by the assembly. Dominic's eyes searched mine, a question in their depths. "Are you ready for this? Can you accept me? All of me?" I gave a small nod, trusting him despite every instinct that warned me to protect myself, to retreat from such vulnerability. He released my hand and stepped closer, until our bodies nearly touched. His arms encircled my waist, strong and steady, anchoring me. I placed my hands on his bare chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath my fingers. "This may hurt," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "I'll try to be gentle." Before I could respond, he lowered his head to the curve where my neck met my shoulder. I felt his lips first, surprisingly soft, followed by the sharp graze of teeth against my sensitive skin. And then, pain, bright and sudden as his canines elongated and sank into my flesh. I gasped, my fingers digging into his shoulders. The pain bloomed outward from the bite, transforming into something else entirely, a rush of heat and pleasure so intense my knees weakened. If not for Dominic's arms around me, I might have fallen. Images flooded my mind, memories that weren't mine, a young boy training with sword and claw, a teenager standing stoic at his mother's funeral, a young man kneeling before his father, accepting the weight of a kingdom upon his shoulders. Dominic's memories, his life flashing through my consciousness as our bond formed, and with the memories came emotions. His determination, his loneliness, his fear of failing his people, his hope that in me, he might find something real in a world of political machinations and false faces. When he finally withdrew, licking the wound closed as tradition demanded, I felt forever changed. The bond hummed between us, a living thing connecting us soul to soul. "It is done," the high priestess announced. "What the goddess has joined, let no wolf tear asunder. Behold your king and queen." The assembly knelt as one, heads bowed in acknowledgement, if not acceptance. I stood beside Dominic, his arm around my waist, feeling simultaneously powerful and terrified. What had I done? What had we done? As if sensing my turmoil, Dominic leaned close. "Breathe, little Omega," he murmured. "You're doing beautifully." His praise warmed me from within. I straightened my spine and lifted my chin, determined not to show weakness before these wolves who had so recently mocked me. "The feast awaits," Dominic announced to the assembly. "Let us celebrate this blessed night." As the crowd began to disperse, filing out to return to the great hall where the banquet would be held, I noticed Rachel lingering near the back, her face a mask of hatred. Beside her stood Counselor Harris, his expression calculating as he bent to whisper something in her ear. They both looked toward us, and a chill ran down my spine despite the warmth of Dominic's arm around me. "They won't accept me easily," I said quietly. Dominic followed my gaze, his expression hardening when he saw who I was looking at. "They don't have to accept you," he replied. "They only have to obey you. Acceptance will come with time, and if it doesn't," his arm tightened around me, "then they will find that my patience has limits." The possessive note in his voice sent a strange thrill through me. No one had ever defended me so fiercely, claimed me so completely. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. "Your Majesty," Gabriel approached, bowing deeply. "The feast is prepared, and may I offer my congratulations to Her Majesty, the Queen." Queen. The title still felt foreign, impossible. I, Eleanor Green, the fat Omega no one wanted, was now Queen of the 5 territories. "Thank you, Gabriel," I managed to reply, grateful when my voice didn't shake. "One moment, Gabriel," Dominic said, his eyes still on me. Her Majesty and I need a private word before we join the celebrations." He turned to the High Priestess. "If you would excuse us?" She nodded, a knowing look in her ancient eyes. "Of course, Your Majesties, the goddess's blessings upon your union." When everyone had gone, leaving us alone in the moonlit chamber, Dominic finally released me, stepping back to look at me fully. "Are you all right?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "The bonding can be overwhelming." I touched the mark on my neck, still tender and tingling with sensation. I saw things, memories, feelings. Were they yours? He nodded. "The bond allows such sharing, especially at first. Did you see anything that troubled you?" I thought of the loneliness I'd felt echoing through his memories, the pressure of kingship weighing on him since childhood. "Only that you've carried too much, for too long," I said softly, without anyone to share the burden. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, then a warming that made my heart race. "And now?" he asked, his voice dropping to a lower register. "Now you have me," I answered simply, "for whatever that's worth." In a swift movement that startled me, Dominic closed the distance between us, his hand cupping my cheek with unexpected gentleness. "It's worth everything, Eleanor, never doubt that." And before I could respond, he lowered his head and kissed me. His lips were warm and surprisingly soft against mine. The kiss began gently, almost hesitantly, as if he were giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, when instead I leaned into him, my hands finding their way to his shoulders, something changed. A growl rumbled in his chest, and the kiss deepened, became hungrier, more demanding. Heat bloomed inside me, spreading outward from my core until my skin felt too tight, too sensitive. The bond between us pulsed and strengthened, magnifying every sensation. I could feel his desire, as if it were my own, his relief that I wasn't recoiling from his touch, his genuine pleasure in holding me. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I felt dizzy with the intensity of it all. Dominic rested his forehead against mine, his hands at my waist, thumbs tracing small circles against the silk of my gown. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you standing alone by the wall," he admitted, his voice rough. I blinked up at him in disbelief. "Why? I don't look like Rachel?" He shook his head, a flash of irritation crossing his features. "Thank the goddess for that." His hand came up to cup my cheek. "Do you know what I saw when I looked at you, Eleanor? Strength. Dignity. A quiet power that has nothing to do with claws or teeth. But I'm beautiful," he interrupted firmly. "Soft where I am hard. Gentle where I am fierce. Perfect in all the ways that matter." His thumb brushed across my lower lip. "I don't want a political alliance or a breeding partnership. I want a mate. A true mate who balances me, challenges me, makes me more than just a crown and a title." I wanted desperately to believe him. To believe that this powerful, handsome alpha king could look at me, at my too round face, my too full figure, and see something desirable. But a lifetime of mockery and rejection couldn't be erased by a few kind words, even from a king. "You barely know me," I said softly. His lips curved in a half-smile. "I know more than you think. The bond showed me glimpses of you too. Your kindness to the pups in your pack. The way you intervened when that beta boy was being bullied, despite your fear of drawing attention to yourself. Your strength in facing each day with dignity, even when surrounded by cruelty." His expression sobered. "I know the essential parts of you, Eleanor. The rest we'll discover together." The earnestness in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, it was almost enough to make me believe. Almost. "And what happens when you tire of me?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "When the novelty wears off, or when the council's pressure becomes too great? Bonded or not, you're still a king. You could set me aside, send me away." "Never." The word emerged as a growl, his eyes flashing alpha gold. "The bond is permanent, Eleanor. I chose you knowing that, wanting that." He took my hands in his expression intense. "I will never set you aside, never send you away. You are my queen, my mate, my other half. Nothing and no one will change that. The bond between us thrummed with the truth of his words. I could feel his sincerity, his determination. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly believe that this might be real, that I might have found acceptance, even love, in the most unexpected place. "Now," Dominic said, his tone lightening as he offered me his arm, "shall we join our guests? I believe we have a feast to attend." I took a deep breath and placed my hand on his arm. "Lead the way, Your Majesty." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "After you, my queen." The great hall had been transformed in our absence. Long tables laden with food and wine formed a U-shape around a central space cleared for dancing. Candles and winter flowers adorned every surface, and musicians played softly from a corner. As we entered, the assembled wolves rose to their feet, bowing and curtsying with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Dominic led me to the high table at the head of the room, where 2 ornate chairs awaited us. As I took my seat beside him, I was acutely aware of the stares directed our way, some curious, some speculative, some openly hostile. Rachel sat at a table not far from ours, her expression thunderous as she watched Dominic lean close to whisper something in my ear. Counselor Harris observed us with narrowed eyes, his fingers drumming thoughtfully against the tabletop. They weren't the only ones. Throughout the hall, I could sense the uncertainty, the confusion, the calculation as the pack leaders and nobles tried to make sense of what had happened tonight. The fat Omega no one wanted was now their queen. They would be evaluating me, testing me, looking for weaknesses to exploit. As if sensing my thoughts, Dominic's hand found mine under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine. Through our bond, I felt his silent reassurance. "You are not alone anymore." The feast progressed with all the pageantry one would expect of a royal celebration. Course after course of exquisite food was served, though I found myself too nervous to eat much. Dominic, I noticed, barely touched his meal as well, his attention divided between me and the subtle power dynamics playing out across the hall. When the formal toasts began, I braced myself for thinly veiled insults disguised as congratulations. But to my surprise, the first to rise was Gabriel, his expression warm and genuine. "To His Majesty King Dominic and Her Majesty Queen Eleanor," he said, raising his goblet high. "May their reign be long and prosperous, and may their union bring peace and balance to the 5 territories." "Hear, hear!" The response came readily from many throats, though I noticed several council members, including Harris, merely lifted their glasses without speaking. After Gabriel came other well-wishers, pack leaders who seemed cautiously optimistic, nobles who recognized the political wisdom of supporting their king's choice, and a few who seemed genuinely pleased by the unusual match. With each toast, I felt myself relaxing slightly. Perhaps this wouldn't be as difficult as I'd feared. And then Rachel stood, her silver gown catching the light as she raised her glass with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "To our new queen," she said, her voice honey-sweet with venom underneath. "May she provide our king with all the comfort he requires." She paused, her gaze sweeping deliberately over my figure. "And may she find the strength to bear the weight of her new responsibilities." The double meaning was clear to everyone. Scattered laughter rippled through the hall, quickly stifled as Dominic's expression darkened. I felt his anger through our bond, hot and sharp, and beneath it, protectiveness so fierce it took my breath away. Before he could respond, before he could make a scene that would only draw more attention to the insult, I placed my hand on his arm and rose to my feet. "Thank you, Rachel," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I believe I understand the true weight of responsibility better than most." I looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of those who had laughed. It takes strength to endure cruelty with dignity. It takes courage to remain kind in a world that often isn't. These are the qualities an Omega brings to the throne. Not physical perfection, but something far more essential. I raised my own glass. "To all of you, my new subjects. May we learn to see beyond appearances to the heart beneath. May we judge each other not by our bodies, but by our actions and our character." A hushed silence fell over the hall. I could feel their surprise. They had expected me to cower, to cry, to run away as I had earlier. They hadn't expected me to stand tall and speak with the authority of a queen. It was Gabriel who broke the silence, rising to his feet once more. "To Queen Eleanor," he said firmly, "wise in ways we have yet to fully appreciate." This time the response was stronger, more voices joining in. Rachel sank back into her seat, her face flushed with humiliation. Beside me, Dominic looked at me with something like wonder in his eyes. "You continually surprise me, little Omega," he murmured, as I took my seat again. I offered him a small smile. I surprised myself. The feast continued, and eventually the tables were cleared for dancing. Dominic led me to the center of the floor for the traditional first dance between newly bonded mates. As his arm circled my waist, drawing me close, whispers rippled through the watching crowd. "Ignore them," he said softly. "Focus on me." I did, letting his steady presence anchor me as we began to move in time with the music. Dancing had never been my strong suit. I'd avoided it for years, too self-conscious about my size and how I might look. But with Dominic guiding me, I found a grace I hadn't known I possessed. "You're a natural," he said. Genuine approval in his voice. I laughed softly. "Now I know you're just being kind. I'm being honest." His hand at my waist tightened slightly. "You move beautifully, Eleanor, like water flowing over stones." The compliment warmed me from within. Through our bond, I could feel that he meant it, that when he looked at me, he truly saw beauty. As we danced, other couples joined us on the floor. I caught glimpses of Gabriel dancing with Helena, both of them smiling at us approvingly. Even some of the council members were participating, though Harris and a few others remained seated, their expressions remote. "Not everyone will accept me easily," I said, more statement than question. Dominic's expression hardened slightly. "They will accept you because I command it. In time, they will accept you because they see your worth for themselves. And if they don't?" He spun me in a graceful turn before pulling me close again. "Then they are fools, and I have no use for fools in my court." The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, it was a heady thing to be the focus of such unwavering support. For a woman who had spent her life being overlooked and undervalued, it felt like standing in the sun after a lifetime of shadows. As the night progressed, I found myself approached by various nobles and pack leaders, each offering congratulations with varying degrees of sincerity. I met them all with the same quiet dignity, neither apologizing for my existence nor demanding their approval. I was their queen now, whether they liked it or not. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was near midnight when I noticed Rachel slip out of the hall, followed shortly by Counselor Harris. Something about their furtive departure sent a chill down my spine. I glanced at Dominic, but he was deep in conversation with a pack leader from the Southern Territories. Trusting my instincts, I excused myself and followed them, careful to maintain enough distance that their werewolf hearing wouldn't detect me. They led me down a dimly lit corridor and into a small antechamber where several other council members waited, along with a few nobles I recognized as being particularly cool toward me during the feast. I pressed myself against the wall beside the partially open door, my heart pounding as their voices drifted out to me. "This is an outrage," Harris was saying, his voice tight with anger. "The king has lost his mind. To choose that creature as his mate, when the Southern Alliance hangs in the balance? Perhaps it's a temporary infatuation," a female voice suggested. "She's an Omega, after all. Their allure can be overwhelming to an unmated alpha. Bonded or not, she can be removed." Rachel's voice, cold and determined. "There are ways." My blood froze in my veins. Were they plotting against me already? Against Dominic? "Careful, Lady Rachel," cautioned a deeper voice. "What you suggest borders on treason." "Is it treason to protect our kingdom from a disastrous mistake?" Harris countered. "The king is young, inexperienced. Sometimes the council must act in his best interests, even against his wishes." "And what exactly are you proposing?" someone asked. There was a momentary silence, and then Harris spoke again, his voice lowered to the point where I had to strain to hear. "For now, we watch and wait. The girl is clearly unsuitable. She'll make mistakes, show her weakness. When she does, we'll be ready to suggest a more appropriate arrangement to His Majesty. And if he refuses? Rachel again, impatience clear in her tone. Then more direct measures may be necessary, Harris replied. But let us hope it doesn't come to that. I'd heard enough. Backing away silently, I hurried back toward the great hall, my mind racing. They were plotting against me, against us, and while their plans seemed vague for now, the threat was real. I nearly collided with Dominic as I rounded a corner. There you are, he said, his relief evident both in his voice and through our bond. I was looking for you. His expression changed as he took in my face. What's wrong? What happened? I glanced around, aware that we were still in a public corridor where anyone might overhear. Not here, I said quietly. Understanding immediately, he took my hand and led me swiftly down the hallway and up a grand staircase to the royal apartments. Once we were safely inside our chambers, with the door locked behind us, he turned to me with concern etched on his features. Tell me, he commanded gently. I did, relating everything I'd overheard. As I spoke, his expression darkened, his eyes flashing gold with alpha anger. I should have them all arrested, he growled when I finished, plotting against my queen, against me. No, I said firmly, surprising both of us with my decisiveness. Not yet. He looked at me in confusion. Eleanor, they threatened you. They made vague suggestions, I corrected. Nothing specific enough to constitute treason. If you move against them now, you'll only create more enemies. I took his hands in mine, meeting his gaze steadily. Let them underestimate me, Dominic. Let them think I'm weak and unsuitable. It will make their eventual defeat all the more satisfying. Surprise flickered across his features, followed by a slow, appreciative smile. My little Omega has a strategic mind, it seems. I've spent a lifetime watching from the shadows, I replied. You learn to see things others miss when no one is paying attention to you. He pulled me into his arms, his expression serious once more. I won't let them harm you, Eleanor. I swear it. I leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. I know. And I won't let them use me to harm you or your kingdom. I looked up at him, a new determination burning inside me. They think I'm weak because of how I look. They'll learn that an Omega's strength has nothing to do with physical power. Dominic's arms tightened around me. We'll face them together. King and Queen, Alpha and Omega. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, balance in all things, as the goddess intended. As I stood there in his embrace, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the lonely, mocked Omega at the beginning of the night to a queen with a mate who saw her true value. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, threats, those who wished to see me fail. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't facing those challenges alone. I had Dominic beside me, his strength complementing my compassion, his fierceness balanced by my calm. Together, we were more than either of us could be separately. The mating bond hummed between us, warm and reassuring, as the moon continued its arc across the night sky. Outside these walls, plots might be forming, alliances shifting, dangers gathering. But in this moment, in this room, there was only us, Alpha and Omega, two halves of a whole, finally complete. They mocked me as the fat Omega no one wanted, I whispered, more to myself than to him. But they were wrong. Dominic tilted my chin up, his eyes glowing with affection, and a fierce pride that took my breath away. They were wrong about many things, he agreed, but most of all, they were wrong to think that your size determined your worth. His thumb brushed across my cheek, wiping away a tear I hadn't realized I'd shed. You are exactly what this kingdom needs, what I need. Never doubt that, my queen. And as his lips met mine once more, I finally, truly believed him.